Friends, I have interviewed some great people at the Western Conservative Summit. I think this is one of the most important interviews I will ever do because of what he's doing to expose an evil in our society. Friends, Andy Ngo is with us today. Known for his coverage on Antifa in Portland, where he wore the milk and concrete stains to prove it, he has established himself as a resilient journalist. Even when he experienced a brain hemorrhage after being beaten by Antifa in the streets of Portland in the summer of 2019, Andy persevered. He faced beatings just last week, escaped with his life, and is with us today. Author of the new book, Unmasked, Andy is the foremost expert on Antifa and its startling history. Living under constant threat, he works tirelessly as the editor-at-large of the Post-Millennial. These unpeaceful demonstrations we are seeing throughout our country are nothing but a Trojan horse for Antifa's larger agenda. Friends, this is an incredibly brave man, and I'm very proud to have him here at the Western Conservative Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Ngo.
There's too many of you crying.
Hello, thank you.
Brother, there's far too many of you dying.
There's very few people who walk out to a standing ovation. Most of the time it happens afterwards. Thank you for what you've been doing. You've brought truth and light to the challenges that many cities are facing, including Denver, right here in our own home state. Let's start out really basic. What's Antifa?
So can people hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So if you read the mainstream press or you watch CNN or any of the main broadcast television networks, you would come up with the impression that these are anti-fascists who are fighting for racial justice and social justice, but they are actually a violent, extremist, insurrectionary, anarchist communist movement and ideology, and they manifest their organization through groups that are connected via networks. And that's what I've spent now years working on as a journalist, covering specifically as my beat very narrowly, and it's come at significant personal cost in the form of harassment, intimidation, and doxing, which is releasing of my address or my family's personal information, and then ultimately assaults. There was one 2 years ago that many people probably heard about, where after they kicked and punched me, they threw all their drinks on me to humiliate me, and that I walked out of that with a brain hemorrhage. I was lucky to make it out alive. And then 3 weeks ago, there was the mob attack that resulted in this injury. So it's a dangerous beat to write on, but a lot of my critics have said, even those who are acting in good faith will ask or say, Andy, why would you return to Portland or Seattle, any of these Antifa epicenters, to write about or to report on them if you've already been subjected to all this going years now, death threats and assaults? And 2 years ago, when they nearly killed me and caused a brain hemorrhage, I gave myself an ultimatum. It was, do you continue, which is to practice and use my First Amendment rights as someone in the press to report on things that are happening in the public, such as these riots, and to unmask those who are involved in violent criminal activities, or I give in to their politics of tyranny and terrorism and go away in silence. And I chose the former, and I paid heavily for that. Thanks. Thank you. It's been hard, but I mean, the fruits of that labor has been the book Unmasked, which it was a bestseller, New York Times bestseller, which I did not expect at all. I didn't think that there was an appetite among the masses to really learn about Antifa. But that effort of continuing to report on them is what led to this book. And I just hope, the one silver lining in this is that the American public can be more informed about this threat that is brewing in major urban metropolitan areas in this country.
Let's show them these threats. You have a PowerPoint with us. Can you walk us through this?
Yeah, so the picture that you see here, this is what they're most known for visually. This is their uniform. It's part of a tactic called black bloc, which means they dress head to toe in black and cover their faces. And they do this so that when they are part of a riot, some of them can engage in criminal activities such as assault or arson or vandalism, and then they can run back into the group and blend back together and make it very, very difficult for victims of assault to identify their assailants, such as what happened with me, and also make it hard for law enforcement to identify anybody. The flag on the right is a symbol that they adopted as their emblem and logo, so quite frequently you'll see that logo or variations of it, including outside this hotel, actually. There were black and red flags being hoisted by them yesterday. So one of the projects that I do is getting the public records of their booking photos, also known as mugshots, in Portland. And they view me as Antifa view me as really an existential threat because their whole project and agenda is based around deception and denial of their own existence. And it's been somewhat successful. I mean, we've had people in the federal government say that Antifa is merely an idea, or they don't exist, or it's a right-wing bogeyman. And what I do is, when these riots happen, I will request the names and the photos of who's been arrested and their charges, and then I'll look and scour what they've written online, and then you'll see all this evidence connecting them to Antifa and how they're connected to different groups. And I put this out into the public. And this is information Antifa members don't want. So,
is this the white supremacy that Joe Biden's talking about? Because they all look to seem to have one color there.
Yeah. So you notice the demographic makeup. Portland has had a year now of riots, more than 1,000 arrestees, and you can actually get data off of that, off of those people who have been booked last year and this year. And unsurprisingly, the majority of them are white. Most of them are young, in their 20s and early 30s. Sorry, I apologize I didn't give a warning for the graphic images. I have this slide and the next ones are pretty graphic, but I just want to show that this so-called idea manifests itself in violence, and sometimes deadly violence. So the day that I was assaulted 2 years ago in June of 2019, during that riot, I wasn't the only one. I was not the only one who was victimized. There were others as well. 8 other people were injured. Several of them were hospitalized. This man was hit on the head with an overhead swing by one of the Antifa with a baton, and he needed 25 staples to close that wound. This is another person that they went after that same day. And I've been shouting from the rooftops in Portland, Oregon, where I was based out of, about this terroristic organization that was organizing openly on the streets of Portland, and I was demonized and ignored. And we had 120 days of riots last year in Portland after George Floyd died. It was the longest, and it was the longest of any of the riots of any city in America. And it became deadly in that, looks like the slide is not there. There was, in August of last year, the Antifa, one of their members, waited in hiding in downtown Portland with a gun and shot dead a conservative, a Trump supporter. And then they celebrated by dancing in the street. And then that person fled out of state and ended up being killed by federal law enforcement in Washington state. So they view events like this, Antifa view events like this, and even just the speech as extremely threatening to them, which is why they've organized a so-called protest outside. But you can see there's lots of allusions to violence, such as this photo of me after I was beaten. And
Why don't other journalists stand up for you?
because of the institutional capture of the far left, journalism, media, academe, entertainment, many local governments, and also federal government. So they get to shift over to a window what they're willing to accept. And I get demonized by other peers in this industry because many of them are either out of ignorance, sympathetic to Antifa because of ignorance, or they're actually fellow travelers, which I've witnessed quite a bit. Many of the rioters in Portland last year were people who were wearing press markings on them while they were engaging in criminal activities and ignoring dispersal orders from law enforcement.
Wow.
So this is a sample of just some of the things that they write around in Portland. And all of this is reported to Portland police. I sound like a broken record. You can, under my name, there's more than 24 reports to local law enforcement about death threats and people showing up at my family's home, and nothing's ever done. And that's just, I mean, Antifa's won in terms of they've created sort of this black hole of anarchy in Portland, where law enforcement, one, don't have the resources to respond, and two, the political consequences for going after Antifa are very, very severe because they are very well connected to far left and some communist legal groups who have vast sums of money to do lawfare, to provide pro bono legal aid, to bail them out of jail. I mean, one of the alleged Antifa rioters right now, there's a state case as well as a federal case, an accused rioter who allegedly went from Indianapolis to Portland to riot and made homemade IEDs. He was held on a $2.1 million hold by the state of Oregon. He's charged with attempted murder because he threw some of these Molotov cocktails at police in Portland, and a local group actually paid the entirety of his bail to get him out. So this is how much money they have. I'm just speaking of Portland as one example. In Minneapolis last year, $35 million was raised for accused rioters, and the now vice president tweeted out support for fundraising for that campaign.
Wow. If local police can't do it because of political reasons, why not the FBI? This is domestic terrorism.
Yeah, so my criticism of not just the current administration, but the previous administration's DOJ is I wonder why the laws that are out there that are on the books to prosecute organized crime, such as the RICO statutes and similar laws, why they weren't being applied to Antifa. I was reading a lot of the criminal complaints at the federal level, and for whatever reason, they were not mentioning the suspects' ties to Antifa, and then therefore the media was reporting that there was no evidence for Antifa. But as I showed with the screenshot, the slide of all the mugshots earlier, all you have to do is, once you have the name of the suspect, look at everything that they've written, and you can find that trail of evidence connecting them to Antifa, which is then quickly deleted, unfortunately. But that's where I come in and I save it and put it out in my reporting. These are the photo on the left and the center are from my injuries from 2 years ago, and the one on the right is from the recent assault, which nobody's been arrested. But I'm not surprised. I've been to this meat grinder before in Portland of where you can be the victim of assault or arson by Antifa and you're not going to get justice in that city. Yeah. So this is a video. I hope it plays. I wanted to, when I was beaten 3 weeks ago, I was undercover before they became suspicious of me, and I think it's probably because I wasn't engaging in any of their criminal activities during their march in the street. They interrogated me and pulled off my mask and my goggles, and I was exposed, and they chased me through downtown. One of them tackled me to the ground and was punching me in the face and head, and the mob was about a block away. They came very close to killing me. I was able to crawl away because the person who pinned me down became distracted, and I ran into the nearest thing that was open, which was a hotel. Some of the Antifa ran after me. One of them was live streaming because she was broadcasting to the world where I was and calling for her comrades to come and finish me off. And this is the video from when I was hiding in the hotel.
No
You're
idea what's
infiltrator ass,
happening.
lying,
Hey, you need to
racist.
get off my property
Okay,
right now.
Holocaust
You're
denying bitch.
trespassing.
I can't wait for you to come out, Andy.
Out.
You thought the milkshakes were bad last time, we're gonna beat the fuck out of you, bitch. Y'all, Andy Ngo's here at the Nines Hotel. Andy Ngo's inside the hotel calling the cops on everyone, saying that he's gonna get killed out here. At the Nines Hotel right here by Pioneer Square. He's hiding right here on the phone with the cops. And they're trying to kick him out.
Stop! Nazis, stop! You see my face, Andy? Andy, you see my face? You see my fucking face? Where fuck is he now? Where is he? Yeah, yeah!
No
You're
idea.
Yeah, so it took like 3 dozen SWAT police in riot gear to respond to secure the front of that hotel because this mob, which kept growing, were trying to break inside while I ran into an elevator and hid on another level and then was transported to hospital. So things are really bad in Portland, and I feel like I can't overstate it, that this is what happens when you turn a blind eye to left-wing extremism, and the populace has been cowed into silence, because if you dare to speak up against them, then you're called a racist, a fascist, and all that, and then they'll dox you. So they really have held the city, the population as hostage in a way. And more literally, I got to see them hold people hostage last year in Seattle. They created an autonomous zone, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, otherwise known as CHAZ. And I went there undercover, I write about in the book, and it was really shocking to see how in the largest city in the Pacific Northwest, Antifa and BLM and other violent extremists could seize 6 blocks of city territory that was really densely populated, by the way, with businesses and high-rise apartments, and they created a hard border with checkpoints, and they had sent their own security with their rifles and pistols guarding these checkpoints, and there were 6 shootings there that happened, 2 homicides. So, when people say that, like, I feel like I don't even have to describe the danger of Antifa. I can just say, just look at what happens when they are given territory. They want to create anarchist communist communes where there's no law, there's no order, and they can do whatever they want. And they've got to experiment that, and it leads to people dying and getting murdered, and fires getting set to buildings with people inside. Yeah.
What I found interesting in your book was the roots with Eastern Germany. Can you discuss that, the kind of historical roots of Antifa, and the fact that essentially what they want to create, as we saw in CHAZ, was something very similar to what we dealt with in Eastern Germany at one point?
Yeah, so Antifa called themselves Antifa or anti-fascist or anti-racist because they're trying to mask their ideological ties to communism. And the logos, the two flags logo that you saw in one of the earlier slides, that comes from the original Antifa, which was a paramilitary of the German Communist Party before World War II. So Antifa take inspiration from violent communists, insurrectionary people who were at that time in the Weimar Republic trying to destabilize the country and cause uprisings to create a communist state. That's who they take inspiration from. That should tell you a lot. And the Antifa ideology, when instituted at a state level, is tyranny, oppression, and death. East Germany, as a communist state, instituted the so-called anti-fascist ideology. That's why they created the Berlin Wall, as we know it, but as the East Germans, they called it the anti-fascist defense barrier. So when Antifa say they're against fascism, how they define fascism is the whole world system of liberal democracy and capitalism and all that, which is why they attack businesses. I mean, they go after small businesses or big businesses, doesn't matter, set fires to it, break the windows. They're trying to attack capital. They view capitalism as intrinsically linked to fascism. So, you know, what I do in my work is I try to inform the public that you don't have to cede the language to them. But unfortunately, it's really, they're so good at propaganda, and they have so many fellow travelers in the media who work in papers of record and broadcast television who are pumping out day in and day out this poison that Antifa are fighting for Black lives and in a society that is more equitable. That's not what they're after. And I don't know how many more people they have to kill and maim and how many more lives they have to destroy before federal authorities wake up, because at the local level, local law enforcement, they do not have the capacity to respond. In Portland, the entire riot-trained police resigned earlier this week. So things are just getting worse, and I'm not particularly optimistic that things will improve.
This is a big mess. This is a big mess. You've got political pressure on the left side that's allowing these entities to fester and to destroy. I remember the city of Denver, the Capitol, had been destroyed for nearly 2 or 3 months before we finally cleaned it up. There was no real political pressure there, so these people aren't punished for what they do. The federal level isn't responding. The media, it sounds like, is sometimes right there with them, so we're not getting the proper coverage on it. People like you providing one step forward on that. You're providing light on that. I've heard that Democrat leaders will say that this is just an idea, that there's no central structure to Antifa. Is there a central structure? Or is there organization? You point out in your book, these things are a lot more linked than we may think.
So what makes Antifa quite hard to dismantle at the local level is that the fact that the local groups are connected by networks, which is usually more regional to the country. And then there are also international links. So in Portland, for example, there are groups like Rose City Antifa, which have the name in it, and they actually identify as an organization. They were involved in assaulting me 2 years ago. There's also groups like the Youth Liberation Front, who organized the riots last year. And then there are some who don't even organize under any group name, or they come up with the name on the spot. For example, the coalition of the Denver communists and other extremists who are outside this hotel right now, they're just calling it the Western BLM Antifa Summit. So all these different names are meant to deceive and to hide sort of who's really involved. But to answer your question, they're not a single organization. So, you know, you can think of it as analogous to the jihadism, like how you can have groups like Islamic State or Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab, any number of groups, and then you have those who just follow the same ideology or follow some of these extremist preachers and leaders and take up their own cause and kill or carry out their own terrorist attacks. So it's analogous to that. It does make it very hard to break up because it's not, you don't have this centralized organization that you can knock over, and that's by design. they make it decentralized and autonomous for that reason.
Friends, Andy Ngo deserves a Pulitzer. He does. For the work that he's doing to expose what's happening out there, he deserves a Pulitzer Prize. And I'm sorry that the media industry doesn't appreciate that. Thank you for that. This book, Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy, is a critical book. I've read it. I strongly recommend you pick it up. Get a chance to meet Andy. You're in the presence of someone who's fighting for the principles of this country, for the principles of humanity, of free speech, bringing light to these organizations, of democracy and the importance of the republic that we enjoy here. I want to thank you, Andy. Everyone, let's give a round of applause to this hero, Andy Ngo.
Thank you so much.
I'm really proud of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Father, we don't need to escalate. War is not the answer, for only God's love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way.
Biff, we've had Jack Phillips and Andy Ngo on this stage. That's pretty remarkable.
That's spectacular.
Most people won't do that. They won't take the oppression that these folks have taken and keep going.
Yeah, I think you have to be a special kind of person to be able to do that. And I thank you for organizing this and bringing these two people who are standing in the face of opposition right here.
That's right, right. For our benefit. For our benefit.
Amen.
They're out there. Friends, we'll be right back after this commercial break with a Western Conservative Summit standard, Mr. Frank Gaffney.
This is a cool